Good evening, everyone. I'm Ellen Sullivan Cravato. I'm CEO of the Capital Campaign for the new Canaan Library, and it is my great pleasure to welcome you to our program this evening. So tonight, it is my pleasure to introduce two of our very favorite people, Jim Childress and Mark Herter of Centerbrook Architects, who I think will be joining me on the screen right now. Jim and Mark, between them, they have nearly 70 years of experience. And over 12 of those years, I believe, at the new Canaan Library project as well, working with our community and our board to make our new library a reality. For those of you who don't know, Centerbrook is an international award-winning architectural team. From major university and public projects to smaller private commissions, Centerbrook are the recipients of over 400 design awards. These include 5 National Honor Awards and 80 design awards from the architect-rich chapter of the Connecticut AIA, and that is more than any other firm. It has been a true privilege to work with them on our new building project. So tonight, we look forward to sharing with them the images and impressions from around the world that have influenced their unique Centerbrook process and which illustrate the way that libraries have evolved in use and function for today's world. In the end, I hope that we might discuss how the insights that they've gained from years of work and research have greatly informed the design process for our own new building plans. I think we're all in for a real treat as we will all get to armchair travel to see how sustainably built and modern libraries have a pivotal role to play in the fabric of communities. Jim and Mark will take audience questions at the end. And now, may I introduce Jim Childress and Mark Herter.
Thanks, Ellen. Very kind introduction. Greatly appreciate that. Mark and I have really enjoyed working on this project with the many people in New Canaan. I think it's not 12 years, it's been about 10 years. Right, Mark? I think it's about
10
when
years,
we started,
yeah.
about 10 years ago.
Yep.
And, you know, creating something like this project, it's never a linear process. It's very dynamic. The process is wonderfully messy, and there are a lot of influences, and like anything with many people involved, the planning and design evolves with everyone nudging it this way and that. And Mark and I thought it would be interesting to share with you some of the ideas that filtered through over the last 10 years from libraries that have been designed around the world. Most of these we've actually seen, some we haven't, just online. Some of these we learned from because it's a great idea that we want to copy. Some we want to adapt and, you know, learning from it, but make it distinct to New Canaan. And some of them are just good examples of what not to do. So I thought I would take you through that for about 25 minutes. Then Mark is going to take you through the library itself, and you hopefully will start to see where these ideas came from, that they're not being done in a vacuum, and that this new library really is at the forefront of what library thinking is around the world. I have to share my screen. Mark, can you see that? It's all working? Great. I have to assume with those of you that are here tonight, especially on such a nice night, if you're listening to this, I don't need to defend libraries to you. You all know the tremendous value of them in our lives. You went as far as drawing a library director from Richmond, New Zealand. I've never been there. I fear I probably might never, but this is where Lisa, your director, started in her early career. I love how this looks a bit like a part of it could be a shopping mall somewhere. The library really integrated into the social fabric of the city. As I said, nothing's really very linear. And I think, but I tried to categorize some of these thoughts as I collected these images of different libraries that have influenced us. And sort of, they're all interrelated. Every library's got sustainable aspects. They're addressing civic pride and how they're developing the third place. But I tried to categorize them into sort of some distinct areas. You know, the civic pride, that idea of just celebrating lifelong learning is a is a real key to big, small, medium-sized libraries everywhere. When I started researching this earlier this week, just bringing all these images together we've collected over the years, I was just struck how many libraries there really are. Go type into Google modern library architecture, modern library buildings around the world. It's phenomenal how many are being built. The Denver Library is maybe a good example. This is where I grew up, so I knew this building. It was a shot in the arm in downtown Denver. What it has to do with Denver, I'm not really sure. Maybe one of the lessons to learn from this, they went out and hired Michael Graves, a world famous architect, to make a grand statement of his. I suppose this interior, the Western reading room upstairs here, has got a little Western quality to it, but it certainly was a tour de force that added some real vitality to a fairly prosaic part of town. The Alexandria Library obviously has been around for, well, gosh, it's about the time of Christ was when it first started, or even earlier, BC. But the new one, they're just adding a new life to it. And it's got, I can't begin to describe how it all relates to its history, but just going by, seeing this large space with the columns running through it, a bit like Karnak, the way the light is coming through, the way you get colored light filtering through. They're really celebrating where it is and what it's about. In Christchurch, southern New Zealand, a fairly prosaic, simple, I don't know the town, I haven't been there, but it all just looks sort of very simple and understated. And yet they've just recently completed this fabulous library that just has a lot of zip to it. Or northern Japan, Kanazawa, I've seen this one, which is spectacular at night, the way the light comes into it. But the real special part is just this one large volume with the books in it, a place to gather on the inside, and the way the light filters in during the day and then sparkles at night. But again, you can see it's a fairly simple working class neighborhood, and then adding this real gem, celebrating lifelong learning. A lot of pride. The new library in Helsinki just finished. You can see a lot of the use of wood, bringing people up, a large social center at the top and the library at the bottom. Or in Calgary, again, I suppose there's a theme here. The new library in Calgary is in a fairly rundown part of town. It's all starting to come back. It's the old part that had kind of lost its zeal, and it's all being rejuvenated with hotels, bars, and restaurants starting to crop up there, and this new exciting library going in the middle. And being in a fairly cold climate, lots of warm colors, lit spaces, some more warmer spaces in the middle. I suppose if it's really snowing, you would duck in there. And then having just a really grand space where everybody can see each other when they come in. So it's the outside of the building is important, but it's also this big grand lobby. Or the new library in Oslo, which again, the same issue of being in a fairly cold climate, finding a way to, that's the Opera House over on the right, and then the new library is in this big civic center right at the head of the harbor, and then being able to bring everybody up to the top. So this started to become one of those influences on us. It's not exactly a living room, but it's the place for everybody to gather and just celebrate being together, studying, just a day out even, to be able to have an enjoyable place to go. And the books are commingled into it. I suppose if there's anything that we learn from these urban libraries is that in a place like New Canaan, you can't really create something like this. There's just not the need for something that's quite that grand. So there are more delicate libraries we learn from. This is in a neighborhood of Barcelona. And I think what we got really attracted to on this was just the small spaces, carving in the connection to the city sort of flowing in and flowing out. It's obviously more Spanish in character and is not going to fit New Canaan, but we started learning from the scale of this and how to break it up so that it connects to the city, and that you get these nice, smaller spaces to gather in, both inside and outside. Again, a very nice climate to do that, but Connecticut's not bad. And so how do we start to create some of those indoor-outdoor relationships? This library in Delft was heavily published when it was built. Again, bringing the land, you might see some influence from this in what we're doing in New Canaan, of trying to connect nature to the library itself by bringing it up, and then creating, thinking about this not as just something to look at, but it's something that you hang out on, you ski on, you bicycle on. It all becomes part of the life of the city. And then inside, celebrating the books in a way. They're pulled off to the side. So is there a way to really create gathering space that's flexible, that you can rearrange in different ways, but it still says, hey, I'm in a library. And then within this, this center space, instead of just one large one, you start to get a little bit more intimate ones here, and then up towards the top, you get different layers of intimacy. So it's sort of, in a way, I think of it as the extroverts are in here and the introverts are up there. So it was just something to really to learn from. Yes, it's a library, but it's getting away from the traditional one that we're used to seeing. I've never seen this. I just love this in northern France, almost on the Belgian border. It's in again, a fairly working class neighborhood, but it's just full of excitement. My guess is there's not much architecture around it to respond to, so it does its own thing. I've always loved this photograph. It feels very French to me, for whatever that's worth. Again, not really fitting for New Canaan, but the way it's carved, creating these smaller and more intimate spaces to it. You can see it up in here. Seems really nice at how you connect it to the city. And then the light-filled spaces inside that are, the architecture itself is fairly quiet. It's just white and glass, but it's in the furniture and the colors. And Mark will show you how this has influenced us in part in what we're doing. This is the little hole that you sneak in there, and then this pink room is inside for the children's reading area. And then, of course, you go up on the roof, and that connection back to nature, both in a grand open way and in a more private way. So those are really full of celebration and excitement. I think there's a layer too that we get really interested in, and how do you create some identity in a library? So it has a sense of place. Where is it? What is it for? I mean, there are libraries like this one in northern Norway, the Knut Hansen Center. He was a Nobel Prize winner in literature, celebrates his work. And I assume this has something to do with him. I'm not knowledgeable enough to talk about that eloquently, but it has a distinction about what it is. This is a new library in the works now, south of Oslo, which is where Heinrich Ibsen grew up and lived, and it's celebrating his work. Or I've always loved the Risdy Library in Providence, which was inspired by this painting. And it just takes an old bank lobby and inserts a library. And as far as I know, I think this was the first of these kind of stairs, which many of you have seen in architecture all over the place. It's just creating a lot of activity in the center of a fairly ornate space, something to learn from, so that you have these layers of sitting, but it can also be used as an amphitheater, something we strive to start learning from. Or this children's library. We discussed this a fair amount about how far to go. What's the right character for the children's library in New Canaan? And there are a lot of examples that just have very distinct qualities that are great fun. And then there's the idea of how does it fit in the land and the surrounding character. I've always loved this library outside of Seattle. I mean, it has that Northwest quality to it with the redwood. It's also, I happen to know the details and the architect who did this, and it's really inexpensive. And so there were some great things to learn from this, how to keep something really simple. And yet I think this has a feel that's very fitting to the Pacific Northwest. Or in contrast, go to Scottsdale, Arizona. I've not seen this one in person, but working with rusted steel, which seems very fitting in here. We talk about this in New Canaan and everybody says, no, don't do that. that doesn't fit. In Arizona, it certainly does. And then, of course, the sustainability, which Mark will talk about in more detail. Each one of these places has a different quality of how do you deal with heating, cooling, and take advantage of those things. This is a library in New Zealand. In contrast to the one I showed you in Christchurch, which seems like a modern. In fact, they're Danish architects. It's got sort of a modern look. I love this one. I've not seen this. It's in the Maori tribal area, and I assume that it just some of the sticks that are happening in here, the way these are carved, there's meaning in this. And you look at clearly there's a lot of water coming down at times in this area. The way they're using the wood and the sticks, you can see the rail kind of thing happening here. I think there's just a wonderful flavor to this that says a lot about, it's distinct. It's not an international thing. It's more about this place and those people. And we find that very attractive. Again, you wouldn't copy this in New Canaan, but you learn from the concept. North of Toronto, this library is interesting in that it's in a working class neighborhood with people from all over the world. And so you can't kind of pick one tradition to respond to. And so the solution is to do something that's really modern. And you can see they've gone to great lengths to make it very thin and delicate. There's a kind of elevating saying, hey, this place is special. These people are special. Let's celebrate that. And you could argue it's kind of an abstract style, if you will, or an international style. But I think for that area and that diverse group of people, there's something very fitting about that. It makes a special place to visit, and you feel proud of having it as your library. As I mentioned, sustainability there are lots of examples layered in all of these. I've always liked this one, and it's in the Ballard section of Seattle that's using wood, which is really prevalent there. It's affordable. It makes a lot of sense in that area. It bends with the light, so it brings more light in. On the south side, which you can do there because of the gray days most of the time, the green roof, and then the materials that are used. Again, just using really simple wood, celebrating the simple structure. It's sort of a nice, there are a lot of other layers of civic pride and identity going on here, but then there's also the sustainable aspect. For this new library in Macau, where the harsh light is a real difficult, this is right near outside of Hong Kong. But there's patterning of trying to control the light, but also to create a story and create a character to the place. Or this one in Cambridge, Massachusetts, which is highly sustainable with its double wall skin. It's got 2 layers of glass, so this gets hotter and cooler, sun shading, controlling the light that's coming in. And so it's a fairly simple box, but with really wonderful light and highly efficient. So those are ones that we looked at as inspiration. How could we learn from those and incorporate them? Then the community commons. That's a layer that we've talked a lot about. How libraries are changing and incorporating a lot more things into them. The Vancouver Library was an early one that started bringing shopping mall type things in, library on one side and a little bit of retail on the other side, bring people into it. This is about the same time in Stavanger, Norway, which is built as a library with restaurants, shopping mall, movie theater, a few other things in there. The library is not incidental, but it's just mixed. You feel that you're going in through a shopping mall, and one door on the right takes you up into the library itself. And it all feels commingled. It's saying that the library is part of everyday life. It's not a standalone thing. This is standalone in Salt Lake City, but again, they played this notion of coming and sort of taking that mall idea into a little bigger edge so that you get shops all the way around here with restaurants. The library is in there, and there are bridges that bring you across. to reading rooms on this side. And through that, there's just all kinds of indoor and outdoor activities. So it really becomes a civic center, a third place in the city to inhabit. The Seattle Library, which I imagine a number of you have seen or heard of, is a real tour de force. One could argue it's ugly. The more I've seen it, the more I kind of like it. It sort of makes sense in the way it all looks out into the city and views off to the mountains, oblique ones. And in a gray climate, all of this light, it doesn't really work with the sun. It's just way too busy, as these photographs show. But most of the time it's gray and rainy, and the quality of light is really pretty friendly. But the great thing to learn from this one is it's a little bit crazy, and the stacks are all tilted. You can see how the floor plate tilts so that it's a continuous spiral as you go up, so that all the books are connected. Really expensive. Never made any sense to me why do that. But anyway, it does allow you to be drawn all the way up through the library. And that was what was really, I think, captivating. It takes you up through it and by all sorts of different things. And so they spent a lot of time looking at how to spread different parts throughout the library and pull you all the way to the top. So the main reading room is up here. It said that the patrons and visitors are the most important, not the staff, not some kind of boardroom. And that analysis and that drive to try and bring those things together, this library was very influential in that. Another one learned from was at North Carolina State. This is a science library, and they have all the books in a big box with robotics. You can go type in this and you watch the robot go out and get your book. And one of the things we learned going there is that on average, every day, 2 books are checked out. This is science. A lot of it is online. Science, those books are really backlogs, people doing some kind of, I don't know, historic research. But what we learned from it is that they spent a lot of time really creating spaces for people to hang out, work together. They introduced a lot of technology into it. So you can go in and you can take a class in how to make a presentation. The lobbies, it's all interconnected, so you can flow all the way through it. This is a big monitor screen where you learn how to make presentations. There's maker studios where people are making things and then presenting them. Lots of little rooms to get together and work together. And of course, again, pulling everybody up to the top. These are the ideas that modern libraries are really looking at, providing people that opportunity when they're not in school. The San Diego Library, similar, an old factory that was taken over. I think there have been more new libraries built in Chile in the last 10 years than anywhere in the world, from what somebody told me. This is kind of the flagship one. But what's interesting about it is they have all sorts of things in this. They have theater, they have art galleries, they have children play spaces, but the children's spaces range from all ages. So you start with, and again, we've learned about this for our library, the toddler space, the tween space, on up to teenagers. They have an over 18 area, which I guess that's part of culture there. It's almost pornographic to me. There were small meeting rooms. There are, I've forgotten, this is a separate kind of reading room. This is a cafe for over 65 people like me. There's the rooftop garden. Here's one of the smaller children area. So it was just this idea of the library catering to different age groups and different interests and celebrating that. Another big influence was the dock in Delft. I don't remember what the acronym is for, but it's sort of, they call it a library concept center. And really there's very few books in this. They tried doing it with, they just experiment with using lots of digital media, and has been very influential in just creating great places to gather, to eat, to hang out, performance, and then the books are kind of commingled into it. And experimenting with a lot of different ways to give people access to digital media. Most recently, the Lohal library is a large, I think it was a train facility. And you can see the stairs I was showing you earlier running through here, connecting everything together, place to hang out, see and be seen. It has that kind of shopping mall quality to it, if you will, place to gather, a place to eat, and the books worked into it. So it really becomes a great place to visit and spend a day, and books are involved with it. That view back down. Again, you know, like I was saying earlier, very simple architecture in the background, and then getting excited with the furniture and the materials in it. And so lastly, I just want to point out that books are forever. We are learning that. We saw when we started this project 10 years ago, a lot of the zeal in school education was to get rid of libraries because everything was going to books. And we have seen over the last 10 years that this starts to change. This is a tiny elementary school up in Fairfield, Connecticut that couldn't afford to keep their library because they needed the space for a classroom. And so what was done was the books were moved out into the hall, and it becomes part of the education. So the books haven't gone away. It's still a fundamental part of it. Bring it out to people. And as I say, over the last 10 years, more and more of these are getting built. This is at Cornell University, just doing something really cool, the books, saying, hey, it's important enough to put these out here. In Japan, having great fun with those. Another one in Japan, it's got the kind of cafe quality and just the real collection. It's a celebration of bookshelves as much as books. Or this one in China, just outside Beijing. Maybe a little bit crazy because it's only real books up to about here, and then they're paintings from all the way up. But again, it's saying, hey, books are important. Come in, let's make them part of your life. This has been influential to us kind of in a direction we're going with the Concourse, is trying to bring that retail quality to it. This is a library, but it's got a bit of that bookstore quality to it. I mean, there are collections of new releases, so that there's like 7 copies that you can check out. But you know, I mean, it definitely has that feel of making the books an exciting thing to borrow. You can see that sort of flavor all the way through. I mean, at first it looks like you're selling chocolates here, but those are all just books that you can check out. And lastly, this one, which again in Holland, they seem to be the most advanced of the libraries, taking this pretty simple space and creating a pyramid of books. Again, just celebrating it, making it an important part of the library experience. And I'll end with this one, which I'm intrigued that the French library was, they just packed the books in here. I don't know why anybody would want to go in this. It's a pretty grim space. There's some reading rooms down below, but maybe it's because this was so grim and basic that they've just recently invested all the money in redoing the, oh gosh, I've forgotten the name of the architect, but it was built about 1880. And it's just a gem of a space. It's exciting. It's really friendly. The books are around here, but, and they've spent, I think, about 5 years renovating this and bringing it back to life. Obviously saying libraries are still very important to people. So hopefully that gives you an idea of some of the ideas we've been talking about. Mark's going to take you through how this has influenced what we're doing in New Canaan. Nothing quite like this, but right for Paris, not New Canaan.
Yeah, nothing quite like that, but let me walk you through. So what does that mean for New Canaan? And so as we think about bringing that around the globe and back to New Canaan, I just want to share with you, as Ellen said and as Jim said, you know, we've been working on this 10 years. We started out 10 years ago with a series of interactive workshops with a group of about 40 people, and we explored a lot of ideas. And since then, we've explored many more, probably 12 different iterations of this library. And during that time, we've been able to talk a lot about the issues that Jim just mentioned. We've been able to watch a lot of these new libraries being built, and we've been able to explore some of the ideas that are really important to New Canaan. And, you know, this is a simple little Wordle, and like any Wordle, when you do it, the things that are most important show up big. And whether it's civic pride, or whether it's community, or sustainability, or the commons, or identity, it's really about local. And with the New Canaan Library, as we have learned over the years, this new page is really about lifelong experiential learning. And as I walk you through this, I'll show you how it's local, how it's about the lifelong experiential learning, and how all of the other elements of what Jim talked about are weaved into that. So this is a great view of the library, a bird's eye view looking back at the new library and the library green and downtown. And the library sits in a unique place in New Canaan along the edge of downtown. And it has the amazing opportunity to be able to take part in civic events like a parade, with the library green and with the library a unique location. And so we see this as a wonderful opportunity to blend the town and the library and the green, and really unite them together. So when you look at the building, there are a lot of inspirations we drew from locally. And probably the best two examples that gave us inspiration were the Noise House, which is really about stone that grows up out of the earth, right? The landscape and the stone and the building are one. And you get these great little windows of views into the courtyard and into the building. And it gives you a glimpse of the interior, but it's really all about being in the landscape as well as being at the edge of and in the building. But the other really great example of mid-century modern that really speaks about your history is a glass house. And that is a very different experience of the landscape. There, really, you view the land, it sits atop a hill, and you view the landscape from within looking out. And so our idea was to take the glass house and put it on top of the Noise House. And that's really the inspiration for the building. So when you look at our materials and our wall sections, you can see on the right that it's really the Noise House at the base with these punched openings that reveal what's going on inside. And then the glass house atop that, which at the corner of the building on either end of Maple reveals itself in full glass height. So when you look at the corner of Maple and South Avenue coming into town, it's celebrated by this glass box at the corner. The children's library is at the bottom, the adult library at the top, and you have a wonderful little children's garden just outside the children's library behind the stone wall. And then back to the entry. So at the entry, we have these series of stone cubes. And as I said, in the Noise House, they kind of reveal what's going on inside, and they celebrate the entrance, which gives you a glimpse into the middle and the heart of the library. On the corner of Maple and Main, we have a similar glass cube that reveals itself and kind of celebrates the entry coming into town along Main Street. That's the auditorium stage. And so you can imagine if you're driving into town and there's, you know, a music ensemble going on stage and a wonderful glass lit box, and you can really see and feel what's going on and understand the celebration as you come into town. This is a view back from the corner of Cherry and Main. So looking back from town across the green and into the rooftop terrace, and you can see the stone base and then the kind of lantern of the library, celebrating the library and the view back to town. So this is a axonometric view of the first floor of the library. And what you'll see in a moment as you come into the library is really what Jim was talking about. We're calling it the main concourse. And it's really the arrival point where we have some new, you'll have a lot of new books. You'll have some seating areas, a cafe, and then an art lounge. And then off to the right is the auditorium. Off to the left is the children's library and the children's garden. And then in the back is the staff area. So as you come into the concourse and you turn left, this is the framed view of the children's library. And as you walk into there, the experience is really about the playfulness of the stacks, of the seating areas, of the different areas for infants, toddlers, tweens, the playful lighting, the views in daylight to the outside, and just the fun kind of nature of this space. And here's a collage of images of the children's library with a variety of seating, a variety of books and stacks. We have the program rooms off to the left, and then you get some glimpses of the tween area off to the right, and a glimpse up toward the living room off on the right-hand side. But what's really wonderful is outside of the children's room, you have this great little children's garden. And although it may seem small, you can have small private groups that do little reading groups or reading activities, but you can have larger groups, 10, 12, 15 people in there as well, in and amongst the trees, sitting on the logs and reading books or doing some kind of program out there. In the auditorium, so this is the view of the auditorium. We actually have two large spaces, one that seats about 200 and another that seats another 100. We can open those up so you can seat about 300 people for a large event. And if you're having a music ensemble, you may want to have the shades open, have the daylight streaming in, or you have the shades closed and do a presentation similar to what we're doing here. We also have an area adjacent to that, which is a new program for the library, the teaching kitchen. And so that's a really great space that you can do teaching classes or cooking classes. You can have a celebrity chef come in. There's a large island at the center, commercial kitchen equipment, and then a table off to the back with a monitor on the top. So everybody in the room can participate in the activities going on. And then back into the concourse, this is a few views that we have explored over the years. You've got the cafe at the end of the concourse with a really incredible view out to the library green and a view back to the concourse and the living room up above. And then as you go to the middle of the living room, there's a set of stairs that bring you up to the heart of the library called the living room, and some really wonderful seating areas along the way. We explored a lot of different layouts with the library of how to organize books, but also how to use those in ways to create space. So Jim was talking about the opportunities to be able to create spaces where you can be alone maybe and read a book, or you can be in a larger group and gather, and be sheltered. So we explored options where you have a little bit of an open plan, or stack the furniture and the stacks in different ways and get more enclosed enclaves where people can sit and work. Up on the second floor, so this is the quiet floor. So on the left-hand side, which is the south, is the adult library area. So you got a bunch of seating areas, some meeting rooms, some stacks, and then on the north side is the teen library. And then right in the middle is the living room, which spans kind of as a mezzanine in the middle of the library all the way up to the roof. This shows you a number of vignettes of furniture and seating areas within the library. So exploring spaces where you can work quietly on larger tables, or along the window wall, have really great views to the outside, but also back to the library, and work individually. In the teen library, you get some great views to the north. It's open, it has some really great seating, banquettes, which the teens love, and it's a really great opportunity for them to make the space their own. This is a section through the building. And so what I described before, we have a living room right in the center. And that is a space at the mezzanine. And our goal, you know, one of the challenges with this library, because it has a large footprint, is how to bring daylight down into the space, how to think about the spaces as they relate to one another. And so you can feel the full volume and the energy of the library, but also separate them as you need to for quiet working space. So, and the children's library down near the bottom, you know, we have the program room with a skylight that gets some really nice natural daylight. The children's area has a large volume, but a variety of different ways to bring the scale down. And the adult room, the adult library up top, and the teen library, where we pull the window wall up at the edge to really bring the daylight into the space. And then I'll show you a little later how we played with the living room ceiling to get the daylight down into the space and really make it a wonderful, naturally lit, daylit space. This is a axonometric view cut at the middle. So you can see the living room right at the center right here. And this is a view of the living room. So this is really the heart of the library, two-story space with wood lined columns, wonderful seating areas, a fireplace at the end, and some great seating along the edge. One of the nice things about this being a two-story space is it not only joins with the concourse just behind me and down the stairs, but it also connects to the second floor up above, and you get some views from balconies on the second floor. So, you know, it's a lively but comfortable, warm space to be in. And so I talked a little bit about sustainability earlier, and we really, through a series of iterative designs, explored the ways in which not only could we make this a highly sustainable building, but also ways in which we could bring daylight into the heart of the building. And so what you can see in the center is we have a series of skylights on the roof with deep light wells, which bounce the light around and bring it deep into the space. And on the floor, you see in yellow, that actually shows the amount of daylight that we get on the floor. And so we consider daylight autonomy, where you don't need artificial light to be 200 lux or more. And so that's what the yellow is on the floor. And we're able to achieve 200 lux in the living room, in the heart of this building, throughout a good part of the day. it brings daylight not only into that space, but into a variety of other spaces around it as well. A number of other sustainable aspects of this building. So we have high efficiency mechanical systems, which keep the energy consumption very low. The daylighting that I talked about allows us to keep the EUI, or energy use intensity, low within the building. We have a green roof on the outside of the rooftop terrace that I'll show you in a moment, which gathers the rainwater and filters it through and really holds it in order to prevent stormwater surge. And it's a really great thing to look at as you look out over the rooftop. Our envelope is very tight. We have a well-insulated building. We looked carefully at the glazing. Not only do we have a unique low-E coating on the glass, but we also have a frit pattern on the glass that we designed that is reminiscent of not only books, but birds. So it's a playful pattern that changes in density from top to bottom. And not only is it great to reduce heat gain, but it's really wonderful to look at when you're sitting along the edge of the library looking out over the landscape. We also have, we plan to have solar panels on the roof. And so this building is designed as an all-electric building. Electricity, and so with solar panels and renewable energy, we'll get a huge benefit from those two combined together on this project. So this is a view back through the living room, thinking about the skylights and the ceiling. So that ceiling steps along and brings daylight deep into the space. Here's a view from the rooftop terrace, looking back over the green roof and back to downtown. So in the library green, it's a really important part of the library. It really extends the spaces within outside. So we think about the outdoor spaces really as outdoor rooms with very different experiences. Close to the building, you have a roof, you have a terrace which spills out from the auditorium for events outside. You have a large shallow sloping green that people can come at any time and enjoy, but you can also have large events there as well. And then seating areas and a bioswale to the north along Cherry Street. So we've looked carefully at developing the pedestrian experience along the edge of the property and developing a really strong relationship between that pedestrian experience and the building and the library green. So here's a view from a plan view over top, and you can see the terrace and the green. Main Street is on the right. Cherry is on the top of the page, South Avenue on the left, and Maple at the bottom. So this is a section through the library green, so the event lawn, and you can see it's a shallow sloping lawn, which is not only perfect for just sitting, you know, having a picnic, having a cup of coffee, reading a book, but it's also really great and a natural amphitheater for larger events, summer theater or anything like that. This is a view along Main Street. So the site wall that is there now, we're going to keep and maintain. We've taken the trees along the edge and we've limbed them up high so that you get some really great views from to and from the sidewalk and the terrace and the library green and the event lawn. And so that experience of pedestrian or library user is heightened by the relationship between the two. This is a view back at the corner of Cherry and Main. So you can see the library, and it's the new library in its full glory, the green, the terrace and the rooftop terrace up at the upper conference room. And an event in the evening on the terrace just outside the auditorium. A really wonderful opportunity to have parties out there, events that spill out from the auditorium, or maybe start there and then go into the auditorium. So it'll be a really wonderful space to enjoy on summer evenings. And a view back through, thinking back to the noise house and the idea of the stone and revealing through openings what's happening inside. And then going back, lastly, taking you back to the corner of Maple and South Avenue where we started, and the idea that the library is really a celebration of the approach into town, and it sits uniquely on that corner that you can celebrate and think about that library experience every time you come into town on South Avenue. So I'm going to turn it back to Ellen and see if you have any questions. Ellen, you're muted.
Right. Thank you very much, Mark and Jim. That was an incredible masterclass in library design. And I have to say, Jim, I think we've just created 100 people who would sign up tomorrow for a guided global tour of libraries with you at the helm as well. And we'll have to talk about that later as a
road trip
project, Jim, for sure. I think that the audience has a few questions, but I would just like to say that everyone should really have a sense and a deeper appreciation for the amount of really thoughtful and detailed planning that has gone into making this not only a wonderful building for the next 100 years, but something that's very unique and specific to our community, and something that you've spent a great deal of time thinking about in terms of what our community needs and wants are. So with that, if anyone has questions, I see we've got a couple in the Q&A. The first question I know was from Gail Schleffler, and she writes that I live in New Canaan and work at Cerami. Cerami have been fans of your work for many years. Her question, what is your view on the role acoustics play in today's libraries? Gone are the cliches of shushing, and yet with all these collaborative spaces, there still needs to be spaces for privacy and hearing yourself think.
I use the phrase extroverts and introverts. You know, some of us like sitting in I like sitting in quiet spaces. Others like sitting in louder spaces. So we try to create layers. You know, as Mark's taking you through that, the living room will tend to be, I think just the character of it suggests that it will be a little bit quieter. And the further you go into the building, the quieter it gets. Where the concourse is definitely meant, where the cafe is meant to be louder. And so you find your place in it. And I think that's what we strive for, which we learn from all these other libraries, to have a variety of spaces. And no, librarians don't shush you. My wife is a librarian, and their lives are all about just taking care of you and making sure you're having a great time and getting what you need. I mean, I think that has really changed. They are in the people business. They're not in the book protection business anymore.
I know,
right.
it's absolutely
so
true.
I would add, sorry, I would add to that Lisa has been really great in reminding us as we go through this to think about it, as Jim said, in layers. And it's really layers of noise. So it's a great question, because as you come into the concourse, that is really the vibrant heart of the beginning of the library, right? And as you move into the spaces from the concourse into, whether it's in the children's, which will be a variety of noise, right? Or you move up to the living room and then the amount of noise changes, and then all the way up to the quiet floor. So frankly, it's really designed as a passage of sound through the library. And we've done it that way intentionally, really to allow for those people that want to go to the quiet place and study or work, and those people that want to stay, as Jim said, whether it's in a concourse or somewhere in the middle in the living room.
Thank you, Mark and Jim. Another question from Nancy Brown. She asks, how will the number of books on display be decided upon? And has any of the interior design been reimagined due to the potential impact of COVID? Well, I think in terms of you working with our staff, Jim and Mark, you can speak exactly. You know, they are very clear on what the right size of our collection should be. And I know you've spent countless hours making sure the stacks are appropriately sized, but please give that an answer if you can.
Sure.
On the book part, yes, we've gone through the collection that you have and anticipated taking into account acquisitions and removal of books over time. It's deliberately set up. The concourse is going in that direction of the bookstore, if you will. So that's really where the new collections are. Things in reserve are in there. Meant to have a lot of vitality. Will tend to have, like some of the pictures I showed, 5 or 6 copies of something. Off the living room is deliberately the fiction area. I always imagine that's where all the murder mysteries are. And so, you know, you could sit in the living room and run in and grab an Agatha Christie in there. And then the upper level is where nonfiction is. So there are some zoning areas in there, and some of the large collection books are up in the nonfiction area. The big art books, for instance. So on the south wall, you can go out and look at those in the light. The graphic novels, which are a bit new to me, and a growing collection, they're over in the teen area, but adults read them too, so it's not in the teen room itself.
It's in that corridor, isn't it?
It's in that corridor in that area. Yeah.
Right.
So we've really thought about the zoning. I've forgotten the second part of that question. Mark, do you remember what?
COVID. Yeah.
Oh, right.
So how do we deal with COVID? I mean, that's a question that we as designers are grappling with for the last year. But certainly in terms of the library, thinking about in a variety of ways, not only separation and space, which, you know, we've thought about space a lot. We've thought about seating areas, but also about HVAC, about air changes and the opportunity or the need to do that in an effective way, but also in a sustainable way, right? So that in a way they fight one another. You want more air, and the more air you have, the more cost you have. But we have a system of VRFs, which are small units that are placed in specific areas that give you, through controls, a lot of air changes as you need them. So we're thinking about it in that way from an air quality standpoint. We're thinking about it in a separation way. And I'm sure the entire staff is thinking about it from a regular cleaning standpoint as well. So it's tricky, but it's definitely in our sights all the time.
There is a serendipitous thing happening, which is probably the wrong word to use in conjunction with COVID. But you know, as I was illustrating, both because of New Canaan and what's going on around the world, we really wanted to reinforce this indoor-outdoor quality, create outdoor rooms. Mark talked about how we set all of these up, big ones, small ones. And what we're learning from schools, secondary schools, and colleges and universities is what they've discovered through COVID, because they've had to go outside with a lot of these classrooms just to be able to spread out, that they're now coming back and saying, you know, when we go forward, we need more of these. We need more outdoor spaces. I find that interesting. that I think we're already ahead of the game with what we started doing pre-COVID on New Canaan.
I think we have time. There's just a couple of more pragmatic questions, if you will. One was, where is it that one drops off a book? And I know we've got an exciting robotic RFID system. Maybe one of you would like to tackle that. And then the next question relates to, where is the parking? And I know we have a lot of good explanation for that.
Right.
Mark, you want to take those?
Yeah, sure. So the book drop off is right along Maple Street. So right at the entry, there is a pull off just off of Maple, and you can put the drop off the book right at the entry, right off of Maple Street. And the parking is in fact right across the street, right on Maple in the center school lot. So parking is really directly adjacent to and a direct connection to the library.
Well, I just like to say to anyone, if you'd like to see more information about the project, you can visit the building project website at newcanaannewlibrary.org. Please feel free to reach out to myself or any member of our committee. We'll be happy to answer any questions you might have. And I hope you will join me in thanking Jim and Mark for this remarkable presentation tonight. We will be, I am sure we're going to be posting this up on our YouTube page. It was so informative and really a thoughtful discussion. So thanks everyone very much. Thank you, Jim and Mark. We really appreciate all your amazing efforts on our behalf.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Ellen, and thank everybody for joining tonight.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.